On behalf of the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, a warm welcome to this 7-day workshop, Her Story, Past, Present and Future. The Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, is a well-known hub of research, publication, seminars, symposia, awareness building, and outreach activities. Like Women's Studies itself, the center's activities are grounded in the day-to-day aspects of women's lives. Collaborations with academia, healthcare, law, police, and NGOs keeps this center in the midst of things. The phenomenal growth of the center over the last decade has been spearheaded by the principal, Professor Shuli Sarkar, a feminist scholar herself, Dr. Parna Ghosh, longtime coordinator, and Dr. Aparna Bandopadhyay, feminist historian. Though she has since moved to Diamond Harbour Women's University, she continues to work closely with this center in her capacity as advisor. Today, the center is helmed by Dr. Parna Ghosh and sociologist Mohua Roy with an able team of academics from the arts and sciences. After this workshop, you are welcome to visit the center located in the college grounds and browse through our publications, an annual journal, and a rich corpus of books. These are available for purchase too. Without more ado, I call upon the principal, Professor Shuli Sarkar, to deliver her inaugural address to you.
Thank you, Shangjukta Di. Respected coordinators, advisors, and members of the Women's Studies Center of Lady Brabourne College, respected speakers, respected collaborators, eminent guests and dignitaries, respected participants, and my esteemed colleagues. A very good morning to all of you. It's a wonderful occasion when, in collaboration with the well-known NGO Swayam and with financial support from ICSSR, our Women's Studies Center of Lady Brabourne College is organizing a 7-day international online workshop, and the workshop is being started now. It's on various aspects of gender-related problems. Throughout history, the central role of women in society has ensured the stability, progress, and long-term development of nations. A nation is empowered only when women and girl children are treated as equal partners as men and boys. As Swami Vivekananda very rightly observed, countries which do not respect women have never become great, nor can they ever become in future. Women empowerment is a gateway to peace and overall prospect for a nation or society at macro level and family or organization at micro level. There is progress only when there is gender parity in all spheres, and particularly regarding the sphere of opportunity. But unfortunately, from the UNDP Human Development reports, it is evident that women are discriminated against men everywhere, at home, at workplace, or in the community. They are consistently deprived of their share in decision-making in domestic and external affairs. The picture is not much brighter. The picture is not much brighter in the Western nations as well. But in the third world countries like India, such gender gaps are undoubtedly naked in sectors like education, health, occupation, political awareness as well as participation, and even family decision making. Under such circumstances, a strong obligation was felt by our Women's Studies Center to organize a 7-day online international workshop on her story, past, present, and future. A number of gender issues are sought to be highlighted in this workshop with regard to the evolution in women's status from the past to the present, and also their probable fates in the years to come. I hope that these thought-provoking talks and presentations will give birth to newer and newer questions and their probable answers. I'm pretty certain that when this workshop is over after a week, we all will be thoroughly enriched and enlightened. I wish this 7-day workshop a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Madam. Dr. Indrani Chaudhuri Dutt, the coordinator of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Lady Brabourne College, will now address you.
Good morning once again, and I simply extend a warm welcome. Madam Principal, Professor Ashorkar has already given to you in this, what I should think is an exemplary enterprise by the Women's Studies Center, this 7-day workshop beginning today. In the quality promotional canvas of Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata, the Women's Studies Center is one of its brightest stars. The recently concluded National Accreditation Assessment that we have faced applauded the work of this center, and indeed, as both Professor Shankar and Madam Principal right after that has enumerated, it is a variegated promotional work. Awareness and sensitization is at its core, and it has imbibed, the center has imbibed throughout its various enterprising work that we see, a very mission and vision of Lady Brabourne College, which is, as you probably are all aware, women empowerment. Be it extending helping hand by creating wider sensitization to marginalized women, be it making our students and the extended family of women aware of the female health and hygiene, or be it making them aware of the legal aid that they can get in times of distress. The Women's Studies Center has a finger, if we say, in every worthwhile pie. And the publications have been mentioned. They are worth mentioning over and over again. And indeed, you're welcome to come to the college and visit the center to see for yourself its vibrant and dynamic work. From the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, we feel that the grade that we have received this time once again, an A grade from NAT, one of the most important components and contributors was the Women's Studies Center. I thank the director and everybody associated with it from my very warm heart. With this 7-day workshops sponsored by ICSSR and in collaboration with SWAM is over, every lady participant will go out of this workshop not only more enlightened and energized and rejuvenated, but echoing within them what Rupi Kaur, the Indian Canadian poet, said, "I want to be full on my own. I want to be so complete I could light a whole quoted from Being Independent by Rupi Kaur. With these few words and wishing them all grand success and all of you a very enriching coming week. Thank you. Namaskar from the Internal Institution.
Thank you, Indrani. May I now request Flavia Agnes, the well-known women's legal rights lawyer and activist, to make her presentation to us. Participants, you can see the bio note of Flavia Agnes projected on your screens, and please take a look at it. Flavia Agnes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me for this keynote address. I have a few points to present to you. And after that, I'm open for discussion. I want to speak about issues concerning the women's movement overall and the general issue of violence against women, that's where my work is located. So let me first give you a brief introduction about myself. I'm based in Mumbai. I'm the founder of the legal center called Majlis, which started in 1990. And we've been working for the last 30 years. Our work is mainly located in providing legal advice and counseling and legal support to victims of domestic and sexual violence. So we have addressed considerable number of issues, but very importantly, domestic violence and child sexual abuse. I know the organization Swayam very well. I've come there and conducted workshops, etc. So when you said Swayam is involved, I was very happy. So you're coming from the perspective of women's studies and academic perspective. I come from the perspective of activism and legal scholarship. So I'm going to take up a few issues that we have addressed in the women's movement. Now, if you see, for us, rape has been the pivotal point around which violence against women centered. Actually, 1979-80, when we started, the whole campaign was for a demand to change the rape law in the context of the Mathura judgment. I don't know how many of you are aware of what is Mathura case. I think all of you should be aware, because that's when the women's movement actually started and the demand for change in law occurred. Mathura was a tribal girl. She was just 15, 16. She was an orphan. She was poor, illiterate. And the young boy of that house where she was working had lured her and kidnapped her in that sense, taken away, abducted her, so to say. And then when her brother found out, he made a complaint, and she was called to the police station. While she was being interrogated in the police station, and she was leaving, two men on duty who were drunk took her to the bathroom at the end of the police station, and raped her. When she came out, for a small group in the night, for a small group of women who were people who were waiting for her, she told them that she was raped by the policemen. And people were very angry, and they asked the police to file a case. But the police refused, saying that come tomorrow. So they protested, and they said, we will not leave till the case is filed. I find this very remarkable in the Mathura rape case, because the village community over there was very much aware. It happened in way back 1972-73 in Maharashtra, in a rural tribal district of Maharashtra. And um, and the issue would have just gone unnoticed. But because of the village's alertness, that a case actually got filed. And in a way, the set of the women's movement in India. And hence I say this case is very, very important to all of us. Thereafter, the case progressed. The lower court acquitted them because they said there were two things, that she had a boyfriend, she had got eloped with a boyfriend, and secondly, there were no marks of injury on her body. She had not fought, and she was only 15 or 16. And you can imagine her plight in the police station, in the presence of the police. How could she even fight? There was the possibility of fighting. How can there be marks on the body of her or the police? So the case went to High Court. High Court convicted them and punished them. They got 5 years and 10 years, each of them. Then the case went to Supreme Court. The case is now known as Tukaram versus State of Maharashtra. And the judgment came in 1978. And what was shocking was the Supreme Court upheld the Sessions Court judgment and acquitted the two policemen, exactly what the Sessions Court said. And they said Mathura is a liar. She had made up this whole story. She was not raped. No sexual intercourse or molestation was proved. They said, but she had consented it. So you can imagine the mindset of the judges in that time. That a 15-year-old girl who's brought to the police station for questioning in the vicinity of the police station is actually consenting to have sex with the policemen on duty who were drunk on duty. So this judgment enraged the women's groups who were active in the human rights movement post-emergency, and it triggered off a whole movement for change of law, because they said rape law has remained unchanged for over a century. So we need a new law, and we need something that will take into account women's oppression. So the terms at the time were gender and patriarchy. And in 1983, we got a new law as well. And certain changes were brought about in the law, and rape was made more serious offense. So thereafter, there was a lot of jubilation. The women's movement started taking up other issues like domestic violence, other concerns, etc. But rape continued to dominate in various other ways. There were so many other cases that came up, very important cases. I'll just mention 2 or 3 of them. In 1978, there was the Ramiza B case, where a Muslim woman was raped by 2 policemen, and her husband was beaten to death. Again, there were protests. There was a huge campaign here. And finally, there was a commission of inquiry set up. Then the case was transferred from Hyderabad to Karnataka, and that commission is inquired into the matter. And the whole effort of the police was to prove that she was a prostitute. She was not looked at as a victim, but she was looked at somebody who had lured this policeman. And they did all kind of natak. That they were all Riya's people who came to identify her and said, yes, I've had sex with her. Yes, she called me to the hotel room and we had sex. Various kind of depositions like this. But finally, they won the case. And it was a big victory that those policemen were convicted, but it came after a really long struggle. Mathura's case, she never won it because the Supreme Court had already given the verdict. But at least her case set off his entire discourse to change the rape law. And that is the victory, as I see it. Then later there were other cases, like there was the case of Suman Rani, there was the case of Bauri Devi. These are very important landmark cases. That's why I am mentioning them. Apart from that, there were so many local cases that were going on. And I assume that every place, whether it is Calcutta, whether it is Delhi, whether it is Bangalore, Chennai, Bombay, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, everywhere, there were cases that women's groups were following up. There were several activist groups that came up, and each of them started following up rape cases. Now in Bauri Devi case, a case from Rajasthan, she was a Satin. She was working on a government program. She's working against child marriage, raising awareness. She came from the lower caste. So the men who raped her belonging to the higher caste. There were a lot of campaigns in Delhi, in Rajasthan, and even the matter went up to Beijing conference. She went there, she discussed the problem. She was never afraid to discuss the problem. She traveled everywhere discussing the issue of her case. But finally, when the verdict came, the accused people were acquitted. Why were they acquitted? Because they said she is not a reliable person. What she has said is not correct. She's made up this story. And how can lower caste men, upper caste men rape a lower caste woman because she's untouchable? They cannot even touch her, leave alone rape her. So this understanding of the judge was, according to me, totally screwed up, because it had a perversion of mind that when we have in a country so many rape cases of Dalit women going on, and that's a very important marker. Oppression of Dalits is centered around rape of Dalit women. And this has been happening everywhere. And the cases of rape of Dalit women is increasing year by year, decade after decade. And yet this judge thinks that upper caste man does not touch a lower caste woman because she is untouchable. Forget about raping her. So this shows the shallow understanding of our judges. So while these are landmark cases, at the time, at this moment, what we are gripped with, thereafter happened Nirbhaya case, there was protest everywhere. Much later, Nirbhaya happened, and we know when Nirbhaya happened. There were public protests. The girl died, but yet there was conviction in the end, and there was death penalty. So this was very important aspect, that when there is a public campaign of a rape case, a gruesome rape case that happened in the capital, and we could all identify with it, of a middle class woman, the reaction of the entire country becomes different. But when it's the rape of a lower caste woman or a Muslim woman, our entire focus is very different, and we are not able to identify with this case. So in the recent times, when this has happened, the case that I would like to highlight here is the Bilkis Bano case. Now in the horizon, Bilkis Bano is the latest case where during the 2002 riots, Bilkis, they were running away from their village to save themselves from the attackers, but the attackers found them, and they raped her. They killed her 3-year-old child. They killed about 14 members of her family. They would have killed her also, but they had brutalized her to such an extent. They thought she was dead, and they left her. Finally, she recovered. She was totally naked. She borrowed some clothes she went to a tribal hamlet nearby, and then there she borrowed some clothes, and finally she went to the police station to file a case. The policeman did not register the case. She fought for 2 decades to get justice. She went from court to court, local court, CBI court. She went to Supreme Court. Human Rights Commission approached the Supreme Court on her behalf for the case to be transferred from Gujarat to Maharashtra. The CBI took up this case. A very famous lawyer, Hari Salve, was appointed as amicus for this trial. And finally, there was conviction. And though there were 20, 25 people charge sheet, finally 11 got convicted. Because others, there was not enough evidence, etc. And they were given punishment for their entire life. The tragedy of it is that on the Independence Day of this year, where we were celebrating Suvarna Mahotsava of the independence, 75 years of Independence Day, the Prime Minister was speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Nari Shakti and how this country should protect women. And that's the pledge that we must take. Around the same time, the 11 people who had raped and murdered her family members were released. And that became such an irony of justice. Became an irony of justice because when these convicts were released, not just they were released, but in public view they were garlanded. Sweets were distributed, and they went back to the same village, which is her village. So you can imagine the travesty of justice that happened on the Independence Day. And even today, our Prime Minister has not addressed this issue. And this is the sad part of it, that such a gruesome violence has been allowed to happen on the Independence Day. And I don't know how well this case is known over there, but everywhere there have been protests. Women groups are opposing and asking the Supreme Court to relook at this. There were many who have filed PILs, and the matter is Supreme Court has given notice, and the Supreme and these people Supreme given notice to the 11 accused person. The irony of the situation is when these men were released, they were not. She was not consulted. What's going to happen to her? Safety is not declared or considered. And on what basis the people who have been convicted by CBI court, High Court, Supreme Court, where their conviction is constantly upheld, were released? It's not just a case of rape and murder. It's a case of a hate crime. It's a case of crime against humanity, where around 3,000 Muslims were killed during these riots. So we cannot see this in isolation. We have to see it in the broader context of total violation of human rights. And to give them remission before serving their sentence and letting them out is a total violation of human rights in the country. So this is the tragedy that we are facing today. So my question, I'm raising one or two very important questions. That how do we look at these crimes? Can we just look at them as gender crimes? Can we look at them as violation of international conventions and human rights protocols established globally, and can we see them in a much more complex way? So I want to get back to the cases that I discussed earlier, but excuse me for a minute. I just want to drink water. Should I even drink water for me? When I'm talking, you should keep water ready. No. Yeah. Okay, 1 minute. Keep it. Light up and keep it close to me. So I want to raise the question. Not only there were 14 people from her family were killed, but her 3-year-old daughter was flung on a rock and her head was smashed. So this is the gruesome violence.
They're asking you questions. No, the marks. Has raised her hand. Somebody's asking you a question.
Now I can't stop.
So ask them to in girl.
I can't see the questions. Can we have the questions later?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make this center here big here when I'm speaking here.
No, continue.
I want my face to come center here. How to do that? Where am I going now?
Flavia Agnes, you.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, 1 second. Huh? What happened?
We can hear you, ma'am.
Where am I?
You are not audible.
Oh, yeah, ma'am.
You are
not
audible, ma'am. You are audible, ma'am.
What am I?
Nothing happened. This is wrong.
Huh? Hello? Yes. Sorry, I got a bit confused here. 1 second. I'll continue. So I want to bring in a concept here which is very important in this case. And this concept is called intersectionality. Intersectionality is the concept that all oppression is linked. The Oxford Dictionary defines intersectionality as the connected nature of social categorization such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. Intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people, gender, race, class, sexual orientation, physical ability, etc. First coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989, intersectionality was added to the Oxford Dictionary in 2015, with its importance increasingly being recognized in the world of women's rights. So today at this gender, when we started the women's movement, we located oppression in patriarchy. We located all women's oppression by understanding patriarchy and how it has happened in the patriarchal context and the state power. All the cases that I discussed with you, Sumandrani, I didn't discuss Sumandrani, Mathura, Ramiza B, they were all police atrocities or state oppression. But now we are coming further into civil society, violence caused by civil society members and the state in collusion. So without an intersectionality lens, our efforts to tackle inequalities and injustice towards women are likely to end up perpetuating systems of inequality. Feminist writer Zoe Samsudji reminds us that intersectionality is such a vital framework for understanding systems of power because woman is not a catch-all category that alone defines all our relationships to power. A Dalit woman or a black woman may experience misogyny and racism, but she still experiences misogyny in her own specific way. Women's movement is based within an analysis of patriarchy, and our struggle has been to understand oppression within the framework of patriarchy. The most of the cases that we followed up were of women of lower caste, from marginalized sections or minority women. But we largely placed the issue within the framework of patriarchy. Now, more recently, we are forced to contend with intersectionality, particularly when we are dealing with the cases such as the Bilkis Bano case or the Hathras Street case. Since Bilkis' case is contemporary, let us examine it in detail. Her gang rape and murder of 14 of her family members on the night of 3rd March 2002, including the gruesome killing of a 3-year-old daughter by men of her village, took place within the 2002 communal riots, which is now termed as a crime against humanity. On 15th August 2022, the Gujarat government released her, the 11 convicts, without giving her notice and without caring for her security. Comes as a shock to her. Earlier, her case was tried by the CBI court in Maharashtra, upheld by the Bombay High Court, and confirmed by the Supreme Court. In a unique instance, she was awarded compensation of 50 lakhs by the Supreme Court. She was just struggling to put together her shattered life when this shocking news hit her and has thrown her life out of gear once again. So she asked each of us a haunting question. Is this how justice ends? Several petitions are filed in the Supreme Court and convicts are made party to the litigation. Several questions are now raised. Were the guidelines and rules laid down by earlier ruling regarding the grant of remission followed? Subhashini Ali of CPI, M. Revati Lal, a journalist, and Rupreka Verma, an academician, as well as Mahua Maitra, a very articulate MP from Trinamool Congress, have filed writ petitions in the Supreme Court. And on 25th August, the Supreme Court issued notice to the 11 convicts. Even some women from the BJP like Khushbu Sundar have spoken and issued statements. But the outrage one felt after Nirbhaya is lacking in the public sphere. So many people are questioning the difference. Mahua has raised a piercing question. Was Bilkis a woman or a Muslim? Why has the Prime Minister, who issued a public announcement on the Independence Day from the ramparts of the Red Fort about Nari Shakti, is silent now? By remaining silent about the release of the 11 convicts prematurely by an administrative order of the Gujarat government, of which he was the chief minister when the riots took place, he has rendered this call for Nari Shakti a mockery. Answering to a question by Barka Dutt as to why she approached the Supreme Court, Mahua said, if I didn't do something relevant, then I too become an oppressor, hinting that each of us need to respond in our own capacity and raise our voices for injustice to Bilkis Bano. Protests have been held and signatures have been collected, yet the public protests are not to the extent of protests held after Nirbhaya incident in 2012. So she asked why the difference, and it is left to each of us to respond. We need to raise questions within not just the framework of patriarchy, but from the framework of intersectionality. Gang rape, multiple murders, and gruesome violence, during which 3,000 Muslims were butchered, cannot warrant remission. So how did this happen? We need to find the answers beyond patriarchy and use a more complex lens of intersectionality. Nirbhaya was middle-class Hindu woman You could identify with her. Bilkis Banu is a Muslim, the other of the nation, and the Hindutva Brigade has no qualms about hailing those convicts, distributing sweets and garlanding them. Now we need to wait and watch how the Supreme Court will restore justice to Bilkis Banu. Will it send the convicts back to prison? Bilkis herself has not approached any court. Her lawyer, Shobha Gupta, has said she's shattered and does not have the strength to keep fighting this battle. It's up to each of us to raise the question and not just be silent spectators. The time constraint restricts me from dwelling further on this because in my limited time, I also want to discuss the issue of rape of Dalit women, which also need to be addressed not just within the prism of gender, but also intersectionality. These were not even women, but teenage girls, gang raped, and their bodies buried or burnt or hanged or shed their own village. In May 2014, the bodies of two minor girls of 14 and 15 were found hanging in UP from Sedat Ganj in Badayon district, who were raped by three brothers. On 18 January 2021, 18-year-old girl, Dalit girl in Mahoba, in 230 kilometers from Lucknow, was studying in 12th standard, was raped and murdered, and a body was found hanging. Systematic follow-up of the Hathras case by human rights defenders resulted in the Supreme Court granting compensation to the family of 25 lakh rupees, allocation of a house in the government scheme, and a job as a junior assistant to a member of the family. Now here, Hathras case, I have not given the details, but I will briefly give you the details. She was raped and left for being as murdered, left dying because she was so brutally assaulted by four men of her own village from upper caste, with Thakur men. And then her mother found her in this bleeding state. They tried to strangle her. Her tongue got cut. Her spine was broken. The brutality was extreme. Then first, initially, police refused to file a case of rape. They refused to admit that she was sexually violated. She was not treated. The case was not filed. And then finally, her state deteriorated. Initially, she was not even able to speak. And then she was transferred to Delhi, Safdarjung Hospital. And that night she died. After she died, the police very clandestinely brought her, all wrapped up, and brought her body to the village. And without informing her own family, she was being attempted to bury next to her house. And when they were asked, what are you doing? What is this? They refused to answer. It is the persistence of a journalist who followed the police van from Delhi to her village in Hathras that the case came to light, and she projected a news live in the middle of the night, saying that they're burning her body. Her parents were pleading, saying that let us at least perform her last rites. But the police just refused her family members to come near the body. And they just buried it. And so that there is no evidence of rape. And this case, thanks to human rights defenders, was at least highlighted. At least it came into the public domain. And this is what police have been doing. And the upper caste Thakur men said it must be her own father who did this. She was having an affair with an upper caste man and he killed her, or he only raped her and killed her. So this kind of narratives are going on, and in Hathras case at least there is conviction. It ended in conviction. Relentless follow-up by human rights lawyers has not brought justice to the family, but at least some solace to them that at least the case is taken seriously. But other cases, we don't even know what has happened. We need to interrogate each of these cases within the lens of intersectionality and go beyond patriarchy. This is not just patriarchy. This is not just gender. This is intersectionality. And this happens to Dalit women, Muslim women all the time. This happens in the riot situation. It happens in the communal violence situation. It happens in the crime against Dalits and in a village of riots that takes place. So this is where we need to focus our attention. The Badayon case made some headlines, but there were similar cases almost every year in the state of UP as a spectacle to teach a lesson for the entire community. The offences are always committed by the upper caste youth of the same village for resisting the sexual advances made by these young men, and this has become a pattern. The trend continues. Mathura, Ramizabi, Maya Tyagi, Suman Rani, etc. were examined within the lens of patriarchy, and crimes committed by state functionaries became the focus. In the Kairanji case of rape of two Dalit women in Bandara district of Maharashtra, Priyanka and Sureka, mother and daughter, there were attempts to build a campaign around caste issue, but this attempt failed, though the case ended in conviction because the punishment was located within the IPC sections of rape and murder. But the rape that occurred within the framework of past atrocities was ignored by the courts. In Bauri Devi's case, upper caste men had raped a woman from the lower caste. The trial judge, while disbelieving her version, questioned how an upper caste man could touch an untouchable woman from the lower caste, leave alone rape her. Caste of the accused and the victim became a relevant factor in acquitting the rapist. Similarly, in the Hathras case, the victim's version was disbelieved because the crime of rape and murder was committed by the youth belonging to the upper caste. It's important to note here that in the Hathras case, the victim was only 19 years old. Bilkis was only 20 years old, 5 months pregnant, and had to witness her own 3-year-old daughter being brutally murdered and 14 of her family members killed. She was spared only because her abusers had violated her to such an extent that they left her assuming she was dead. She heroically fought the battle from court to court till finally she won the legal battle after nearly 2 decades of struggle. She did not anticipate that finally it would end this way. Several members of the party in power and government functionaries were part of the committee that was set up to examine their remission. In her case, the issue of the convicts with Brahmins and hence culture or sanskari has been foregone, making a mockery of the constitution and mandate of equality and non-discrimination on the basis of caste or gender. So what do we do now? We need to bring marginalization center stage and examine the offense from the canvas of multiple levels of marginalization and frame this crime as crime against humanity and not just a gender crime. In US, the race issue along with patriarchal framework has become dominant while addressing the oppression of Black women within the framework of intersectionality. We need to address violations of Bilkis Bano and other similar instances within this broad canvas and prescribe punishment as hate crimes or crimes against humanity, and need to build a campaign within the broader framework of marginality. To answer Mahua's question, is Bilkis Bano a Muslim or a woman? She is both a Muslim and a woman, and her identity cannot be split, and hence we need the complex framework beyond gender and patriarchy to understand her. Any questions? This Anjan Saha has a question. Does Indian law recognize hate crime as a separate category? No, we don't. And we don't have a separate category. And this earlier question also, which are the grounds of remission for convicted criminals? Are some categories of crime excluded from this ambit? Yes, surely. Some categories of crimes like hate crimes are excluded from the category. But the government did not take notice of the earlier judgment also. Yeah, I'm not. We are not a signatory to the Roman Convention of Crimes Against Humanity, unfortunately. But yet we are governed by it.
Madam, thank you very much for that very. Have you completed your talk, madam?
Yes, I have completed. If there are questions, I will take them.
Yes, there has been one question so far, and thank you very much for your. She said.
Was I clear? Was I able to like communicate?
Yes, you were very clear, madam. And thank you very much for taking the question, though it was a keynote lecture. And thank you very much once again. I will now hand over the microphone to Mohua Roy for conducting the rest of the session.
Hello, ma'am. Dear participants, do you have any more questions for Flavia ma'am? If you have any more questions, you can post them in the chat box. Ma'am has already addressed the two questions that has been posed already. So if you have any more questions,
I have a question. Have you all heard about the Bilkis Banu case?
Yes, ma'am, we have heard about it.
Okay, and what about the Hathras case?
Yes, ma'am, Hathras case too. Yes, we have heard about it.
Not heard about the Hathras. Have you heard about the Mathura rape case?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That is very basic.
Yes, ma'am, actually the most shocking one is that Bilkis Banu case. Because, you know, what has happened on Independence Day, like you have mentioned, it has really, changed a lot of things, because we as a citizen think that what is happening in society, like why the criminals or the culprits can't be convicted. It's so basic, like everyone knows that, you know, she is a victim, but I don't know, everyone is just mute.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad at least you've heard about it, and it is shocked the participants.
Ma'am, will you please elaborate on Maya Tegi case and Shona Rani case?
Yeah. Maya Tagi case happened, I think, post-emergency, police brutality. A whole group of policemen, they were passing through that village, and she was in the procession, and they tried to like harass her, and the men opposed. And when the men opposed, they came back with a big battalion arm. They opened fire, killed the men, and brutally raped Maya Tyagi. She was pregnant at that time. They inserted rifle bayonets onto her vagina and dragged her without clothes across the marketplace. And finally, there was, after many years, the conviction happened. The policemen were convicted, but by the time it was too late for her. So people went and asked, how do you feel now? And she says, I feel nothing because so many years have passed and nothing has happened and my life is going on like this only. So there's nothing much that has changed in my life because of this conviction. So that was Maya Tyagi case. Followed up for many years. The trial shifted from that police station to that district to another district. And finally there was, that is how the case ended. Sumandani case is yet another very important case. Sumandani had eloped with her boyfriend. At the border of Himachal Pradesh and Rajasthan, she was caught. They said she's a minor, she was brought back. And there the policemen molested her. So she filed a case. And the policemen did not record it immediately. There was delay. Finally, the policemen were convicted for 10 years. Then the Supreme Court reduced it to 5 years. So when the case was reduced, they said she's not a woman of good conduct and character. So that is why the punishment is reduced. So there was a big hue and cry. And women's movement asked this to be reviewed. And everywhere there were protests against it. When it reviewed, Supreme Court clarified that it was not, Supreme Court was not commenting on her character or conduct. We're just commenting on the late filing of the case. The file was filed late. So they had doubts about her. And that's why the sentence was reduced. And a character and conduct of the victim should not matter at all in reducing the sentence. But they did not increase the sentence to 10 years as it was. They let it remain, and they gave a different justification that a woman's character or her conduct has no bearings on the punishment to the accused. So this is the Sumandani case. It's called Premchand versus Rajasthan. You can check it up. There are 2 judgments on that.
Ma'am, do you think that addition of more women judges would lead to sensitization of them about gender issues?
I doubt it. See, gender sensitization, a male judge also can be very sensitive. All the participants, male participants here can also be very sensitive. It's not your anatomy that matters. It is your sensitivity to the gender issue that matters. And unless you go through a particular training or are sensitized and oriented towards it, just because you are a woman does not automatically mean that they will be sensitive to women's issues. So when women are elevated to the higher positions, excuse me, usually they like to imitate men. They want to act as men, and they want to be seen as, perceived as more men than women.
Yes.
This is what happened with Indira Gandhi also.
Yes.
So I doubt that by itself they will be more sensitive. There may be some who are very sensitive. There may be others who are not sensitive. Doesn't depend on the gender idea.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, there is a question by Shantini Ukil. Can we take that question, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, she has asked, why is the outrage in Bilkis Banu case less compared to the Nirbhaya case?
Yeah, that's a question I have raised in my presentation also. Why is it less? Is it because I identify her as one of us, that she was a Hindu, this happened in, she was middle class, and she became one of us in that sense, whereas we see Bilkis Banu as a Muslim, the other, and not really belonging to one of us, and that's why the race is different. It's how we identify with the accused and how we identify with the victim, the convicts. So how the hailing, or see the response to the convicts. There the clamor was for death penalty, death penalty. They were men of the lower class, she was of the middle class. Here, the men are Brahmins and she is a Muslim. So for in the mind of a lot of people, in fact, she is not something we can identify with. And hence only those who are very much concerned about issues of secularism, of communal rights, and those are concerned with what happens during hate crimes that are taking up this issue, and not everybody else. That is the tragedy, unfortunately. So my question is, gender is not an inclusive category. Within gender, there are specifications, and we need to address each of them. Because it's not just because I'm a woman I filed a case or I filed a writ petition. That's what Maitri Mahua has raised, that was she a Muslim or was she a woman? Why isn't the Prime Minister not answering the questions? Why is he not responded to this? Doesn't she come within the context of the Nari Shakti that he was addressing on Independence Day? So these are very important questions.
Thank you so much, Madam. Flavia ma'am, we are honored to have you with us today in our keynote address for the workshop. Ma'am.
There is one question I would like to answer.
Yes, of course, ma'am, please.
Can we connect domestic violence to intersectionality? The difference here is rape during communal violence is a community-based question. It is within two different communities that happens. Whereas domestic violence happens, as the title suggests, is within the family. So the patriarchy applies there much more, because within the patriarchal structure that we see experience domestic violence, dowry harassment, dowry death, etc. within the same family and the same community. So here intersectionality does not actually connect. Very good question, and we need to probe further. Okay. Hello?
Yes. Do we have any more further questions for ma'am? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are really honored. And thank you so much for your very insightful and thought-provoking presentation. Ma'am, it was an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.